Hello everyone, and welcome to the 12th Canadian Science Policy Conference interview series. My name is Homa Kheyrollah. I'm co-chair of the CSPC Program Committee, and I'm joined today with Dr. Shawn Marshall, Department Science Advisor of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Dr. Marshall is also professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Calgary, where he held the Canada Researcher in Climate Change from 2007 to 2017. Dr. Marshall, you study climatology, glaciology, climate change impacts, water resources, and global sea level rise, and now playing a great role in science policy. Tell us, what was your experience transitioning from science to science policy?
Thanks, Homa. And I just want to say at the start, it's an honor to be here speaking about this with you, because at some level, I feel like I should be interviewing you. You're this wonderful academic that is such a leader in science policy in Canada. So
you are too kind.
My honor to be here. But for me, I've this huge honor and privilege to be Departmental Science Advisor at Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'm 15 months now into my tenure, and I feel like I'm still learning every day, but I'm starting to feel settled in a little bit. I'll be honest, the transition wasn't so easy. It's taken me a while to kind of understand maybe my role. The whole Departmental Science Advisor network is still pretty new, and these were new positions created in the departments, in the science-based departments and agencies in Government of Canada. And so people have to get used to us and learn to use us enough, to call on us for science advice. And for me, the culture is, quite a bit different than the universities. I've just had to learn to navigate it and learn how to be able to, contribute really effectively. But it's really exciting. I guess in my academic world, you understand that world really well, or there's still lots of really good problems to work on. It's all really interesting, and I can imagine doing that for the rest of my life, working on the primary science. But at some level, academic circles are also a bit limited, and so this is a chance to contribute to something bigger. And there's so much science going on at ECCC, at Environment and Climate Change Canada, and so I'm still learning every day. But it's a chance to be part of something bigger with these huge Government of Canada science initiatives.
That's great. And as you mentioned about the science, so from the science point of view, Dr. Marshall, what is your opinion on how scientists can leverage research skills in policy development?
So it's pretty interesting. I'm not a policy advisor, I'm a science advisor, so I've had to learn my role a little bit that way, just to stick to the science. But there's again, it's been a culture shock, and I've kind of learned, and I'm still learning, because it's kind of a different skill set from science in some ways. A lot of it is learning to communicate really concisely and clearly the importance of things and not get bogged down in some of the scientific details. Because, scientists, we love to think about the uncertainties and all the things we don't know, and that's not always what people need to hear. So I'm kind of learning how to be more effective that way, I think. But there's also some confidence questions in a way, because as a trained scientist, you learn to only talk about something where you're totally the expert, where you really know what you're doing. You don't go to a big scientific conference and talk about somebody else's discipline or something. But now I'm looking after these files where I don't have a deep background. So on climate and on water, I'm pretty comfortable, but with plastics or environmental toxicology, or a lot of the things at ECCC, I'm kind of learning on the fly. And at first I thought, well, who am I to give science advice on something like this? But I think as trained scientists, we do learn to, we can read nature papers and on any subject in environmental science and get the big picture and understand what's good science and what's not, and learn the big picture and kind of put together the evidence. I can go find the right people to talk to and speak their language, and they can explain to me what we know, what we don't know, what the real maybe science policy advice will be. And a lot of senior management, executive, they're not scientists. They don't have the time, and they don't necessarily have that background. So I guess I've learned that it can be useful, even if it takes me a few days to really get up to speed and become, put together my science advice. on something like plastic science, where I don't have a big academic background, I can actually still offer some help, and at the same time, it's pretty exciting for me to learn all these things.
Yeah, that's great. So I would like to ask you a question about capacity building as a next question. So, as you know, capacity building is an important element when talking about climate change. Could you please let us know about activities on capacity building on climate science or monitoring and adaptive capacity in Canada?
Yeah, that's a huge one with climate change. I think I'll step back even a little bit. It's like one of the big pleasures, honors of this position at ECCC, working as departmental science advisor, is the chance to work with my counterparts in other federal departments and agencies, to work with the Office of the Chief Science Advisor and some of these big questions that cut across departments. So things like climate change for sure, but also water and open science and Indigenous partnerships with communities across Canada. There's lots of common issues and places where I guess we need more capacity, and we need to be working together a little bit better than maybe we always have. And I mean, I say that not in a critical way, because I think I see it a lot. There's all these amazing people internally, scientists that are doing their jobs perfectly, and they're just really good at what they do, and they're fantastic. But then there are these places that are maybe between the administrative cracks in the departments, where it's just nobody's job to look after something like that. So there are things like maybe the interface between environmental and public health, or aspects of water, or aspects of permafrost, where NRCan does lots of great permafrost work, but it's not necessarily answering questions about permafrost carbon cycles or permafrost hydrology that Environment Canada needs to know. So it's one of those things that it's nobody's job to really look after that, but we need that knowledge. So part of our jobs as the Departmental Science Advisor Network is to build some capacity and identify those things where we can maybe work together across departments and with the university community to fill some knowledge gaps. And in the climate change science file, it's a huge one, but there's been a lot of work done at ECCC, where they're soon going to be, releasing it's kind of a state of knowledge document that talks about, where are some of the knowledge gaps where we need to be really working together as a national community, not just as a department. And so that's exciting. That's really working on the science that we know and love, but looking for ways to advance the science and the understanding and the knowledge within Canada. I guess that's why I came here. That's why I was attracted to this position, to try to move things forward in a way that I can't just from my research job.
Yeah, it's as you mentioned, it's a very important aspect of your job for sure. And as a scientist who I'm working in Northern studies, I really see this capacity building mostly in Northern community maybe is one of the very important issues. If we can build community lead programming, monitoring, there's opportunities like for Northern communities like that would be great. And I think it's actually needed nowadays.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree with you, Homa. It's something that not just ECCC, but a lot of departments are kind of struggling with, and it's so obvious the need for those partnerships with communities and capacity building in those communities, both for lab capabilities, so we're not always sending samples south and things like that, but also COVID-19's really shone a spotlight on that, I think, because a lot of field programs, probably yours and mine both, kind of got grounded this year, and a lot of data wasn't collected. This was globally, but I think if there was enough community capacity, and we saw this in some examples, like in Cambridge Bay with CHARS, if there's enough community capacity and investment and local training, then we don't have to have these big data gaps. It empowers local communities, and we can work together to not have these sort of gaps, or maybe to build more resilience into our science. So this is really good timing to work on those, especially in the North, work on those community science developments and partnerships.
Shawn, I have lots of questions for you. But unfortunately, our time is limited, so I had to be selective with the questions. But there is one question in particular I really like to discuss with you, and I think it's very, very important. So I would like to talk about the open science and the open science roadmap, so which is recommended to the federal government by our Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Niemer, which outlines the next step that should be taken to make federal science open to all while respecting the privacy, security, ethical consideration, right? So this is also included in the recently published CSA annual report. So it gives an action plan to departments and agencies. If I'm not mistaken, by January 2021, please correct me if I'm wrong. Is there, maybe I ask, is there any action plan by Environment and Climate Change Canada to establish a broader pan-Canadian open science strategy for Canadian science? Could you please give us some updates on that?
There's so much happening on this front, and they're probably within ECCC. They don't necessarily have mandate for the pan-Canadian strategy, but they are developing the internal departmental action plan, to go with the open science roadmap. I think all the science-based departments and agencies are busy with that activity, and it will come out in early 2021, the sort of ECCC action implementation plan. A lot of it with the open science roadmap is starting with open publications and mechanisms for that, and then into the harder problem of open data provision. I say harder because it's just complicated. But certainly at the high level within Government of Canada, within ECCC administration, everyone gets it that this is needed so badly, and that the world needs and is driving towards open data, open science, and including open codes for the kind of modeling we do for weather, climate, hydrology. This is all kind of an increasing expectation, maybe late coming because it's all publicly funded science, and so it's kind of obvious that it needs to be there for the public, but it hasn't been the culture maybe. And so in some parts of Environment Climate Change Canada, they've been really, progressive in getting, so let's say the weather data, the climate data, the hydrometric data has been out there publicly available for a couple of decades now or longer. And as a researcher, I was using a lot of that data, but in other places, it's still coming. I guess things like water quality and biodiversity data, and those get complicated because it's not just one department, or it's not just federal data, it's partnerships with municipalities and provinces and territories and Indigenous nations, and so there's sensitivities, and we can't kind of unilaterally do this as one government department, but that's not an excuse not to do it. And so I know they're working hard on developing water quality data on the open government portal. If you go to open.science.ca, you see the initial kind of real-time efforts with open science coming forward. But it's frustrating, and so I understand this, because as a researcher, I would go to a portal like that. You see water quality data, and it sounds promising, but you click on it, and it's maybe just metadata.
Exactly.
Maybe there's an app that doesn't actually have anything working, or you might get an environmental indicator, but it's not actually the real data. It's like a summary statistic, but it's not the actual nitrate levels or water temperatures or what you might want. And so all that data that's being collected across different jurisdictions does need to be pulled together. I know that's going to be a big part of the mandate of the Canada Water Agency, is this kind of a water data portal with sort of common standards, and making it not just open, but like a value added in terms of the information value, because I don't know, it's a problem in universities too. I'll take that on myself. We collect lots of data, and a lot of that is hard to find, hard to track. And as a scientist, I've collected lots of data that I've only just started in the past few years to become more aware of it, and I guess myself develop a culture putting it out there. But it's not easy, because it doesn't do anyone a service to put data out there that's not quality controlled or that's not properly explained. It can even lead to misinformation. So it has to be done kind of carefully and done well. And the government's moving there, but it's taking a while, I think, government of Canada is any government. It's a good example of that kind of old adage that if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think as a university researcher, you can move quickly and you can be very agile and go quickly into a new space. But to bring government of Canada up into really good system, really good framework for open data portal, it's taking a while. But agencies like NRCan and ECCC are really working on this, and I think it's coming.
That's great to hear. I mean, I understand that that's a very complicated effort. I know that's not easy, but as a scientist, me personally, I can't wait to see that this happens, really.
Yes. No, same.
There are efforts that there already, so we know that if you're writing a proposal right now, most of the answer are funded, so you have to be clear, where is your data? And when you publish, you have to publish your data as well. That's great effort to see. And yeah.
The whole culture globally is really coming, so it is an exciting time. It's easy to be impatient. I feel that way sometimes too, but even open publication, like Nature Journal is now signing open publication arrangements with certain, it's one of the last journals to become open. It's still not there, but it's the community's forcing it there, because now if you get a grant from NSERC, from Tri-Council, you have to be making your publications and your data available as part of the research effort. That's kind of new. We're still adapting to this, and the journals and the whole scientific framework is going to be adapting to this. But in the meantime, it's still a struggle to get the data we need sometimes.
Exactly. Thank you. So move on. I mean, one thing that I really appreciate that you're bringing the scientific knowledge into the policy makings, and you also have been involved in CSPC for a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, and now Department of Science Advisor. I would like to hear your opinion with these all different perspectives from the role of organizations like CSPC playing a role in bridging between science and policy.
I'm biased, but I think CSPC is amazing. They're just really doing the job and filling a niche. So this is the 12th conference this year. So I've been an academic scientific researcher in Canada for about 20 years. I started at the University of Calgary in 2000, pre-CSPC, and this was a huge gap in the country. Homa, you've come in at a very good time to your academic career, where we're starting to have these bridges. So now we have CSPC, and we have a national chief science advisor for Canada. We have the departmental science advisor network. Some provinces and territories are starting to have science advisors. This needs to come further, but it's a really exciting time for science policy. And I joined CSPC, you're right, this is my third year as a kind of a volunteer working with the program committee for a CSPC conference. And I really love it. It's the first year I went, I guess it was 2018, getting to actually hear from the policy perspective a lot more helped to change the way I think about my science a little bit. So it's really good for scientists like me. I mean, I love being out in the field doing my measurements, and that's enough motivation on its own. It's fun, it's exciting. I feel like you're contributing little bits of understanding about scientific processes, but you don't always know what they're for. Maybe you're not even asking the right questions sometimes, because there might be good science questions, but they're not what the country needs or what agencies or what fills in a real gap in understanding towards bigger questions like how we mitigate climate change, or what's the real concern about water resources in Western Canada, and what's the most important thing to be measuring about the glaciers to get at that. You
exactly
get those questions by talking to the stakeholders and listening to the policy makers, and it's a pretty complicated world compared to science. So I can understand as a scientist just staying with my science, and it's simpler. It follows, conservation rules and equations, and it's logical. The policy world is sometimes really confusing.
Exactly.
Well beyond just the science, there are all these other considerations, and so I'm happy just to gain that understanding. I think I first started to gain that more nuanced understanding through CSPC, kind of listening to. I kind of came in idealistically thinking, why don't we just follow the scientific advice? And they're listening to scientific advice, but there are other considerations too that really need to be at the table. So for sure, the science needs to be here at the table too, and it hasn't always been. And so it's my job to push the science to make sure it's a serious part of the conversation. Respecting the other considerations and sort of all the balance of things that go into making policy. CSPC is getting a lot of international renown, I think, for just being a really good group of people and an amazing conference at this interface.
I do agree with you. And I started my faculty career with knowing about CSPC helps a lot. And I do encourage every scientist come and be involved. Not even if you don't want to be active in this part, I believe it will change your perspective. When I write the proposal right now, I have a better view about the impacts, which definitely helped me a lot. And I'm sure you agree with that as well.
Yeah, very much. It's sometimes really good to get outside of academic circles. You've started in a wonderful way, and you can see it with how successful you are and your problems that you're working on and the partnerships you've made in NWT. It's taken me a little while to get there to understand this, engage in this broader world and the bigger questions. But it's a really good challenge for us as scientists, I think, to learn and stick a toe into this world. And we need more science in Ottawa, honestly, and in Washington and in all the capitals. And I think we're getting there. This is a good time. I think we see it a bit with COVID-19, actually, that the voice of scientists, actual scientists, public health professionals are needed and valued. It needs to be part of our political discourse and our policy development across so many questions that matter for the country. So it's CSPC champions that. And now I think the trick is just to carry some of the momentum in between CSPC meetings, because I think every November it's this huge, amazing conference that brings people together, and it's up to us, I think, to continue those connections and conversations, from in between these annual scientific summits and science policy conferences, where we just need to keep in touch, because like any partnership, like partnering with communities in the North that you've done, you can't just check in once a year. You need to be constantly communicating, and this is something that scientists need to learn too.
Exactly. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you for your time. And as a final question, is it anything you want to add? Is it anything we didn't discuss? There are tons of things we didn't discuss that I wish we could, but because of sake of time, so I might ask you the last question and ask you if you want to add anything that I didn't ask you and you wanted to talk about.
I think that's wonderful. I think I've gone over my 10 minutes and I've probably talked too much, but you're right. We could spend an hour or two here, longer than anyone needs to listen to. But thank you so much. Again, it's an honor to be interviewed by you. Next time it'll be maybe the other way around, and we'll hear about your experiences here helping, I guess, advance not just science, but science policy in Canada. So thank you to you, Homa, and to CSPC.
Thank you, Shawn, for joining me today. It was great talking to you as always, and I hope you enjoyed the conference. Thank you.
Very much so. Thanks. Bye-bye now.